Hey guys, settle in. But before we start, make sure that you subscribed. Tonight, we're wandering into one of those corners of history that was never meant to be impressive, only tolerable. Tonight's subject is medieval intoxication. Not the dramatic kind with goblets raised in torchlight, but the quiet, accidental, deeply confusing kind. The sort of intoxication that happened because someone planted the wrong herb next to the onions. Or brewed beer with bread that had ideas of its own. So before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. You don't need to sit up straight. History doesn't mind if you're horizontal. Maybe loosen your shoulders. Let your jaw unclench. And if you fall asleep halfway through, history will forgive you. It always does. Now, imagine medieval Europe. Not the romantic version. No sweeping orchestral music. No clean armor. No heroic lighting. Instead, imagine a drafty room. One candle. A smell that suggests wool, smoke, damp wood, and regret. This was a world without electricity, caffeine, antidepressants, or reliable plumbing. Entertainment was limited. Pain relief was optional. And most days ended exactly how they began, tired, sore, and mildly disappointed. So it should not surprise us that medieval people experimented. Quietly. Reluctantly. And often accidentally. They didn't call it getting high. They called it medicine. Or prayer. Or fate. And sometimes, just dinner, the medieval pharmacy, also known as the garden. In the Middle Ages, the line between food, medicine, and hallucination was flexible. Very flexible. If it grew from the ground, it was worth trying at least once. Roots, leaves, seeds, fungi, all were fair game. There were no warning labels. No dosage charts. Just experience, rumor, and the vague hope that whatever you just ate wouldn't talk back. Monks recorded plants in herbals. Midwives passed recipes by memory. Apothecaries experimented with confidence bordering on optimism. And peasants. Peasants mostly learned through trial, error, and survival. Sometimes the lesson stuck. Sometimes the person didn't. Henbane, the plant that was never quite a yes. Henbane was everywhere. Growing along roadsides. Near fields. Close enough to food crops to cause a lot of misunderstandings. In small doses, henbane was useful. It eased pain. Encouraged sleep. Calmed nerves. In larger doses, it did none of those things. Henbane caused delirium. Hallucinations. Uncontrollable movement. Intense thirst. And the feeling that objects were alive and deeply disappointed in you. People reported seeing animals speak. Walls breathe. Time slow to a crawl. This was not considered ideal. But medieval medicine rarely aimed for ideal. It aimed for less screaming than before. Henbane was smoked, brewed, or applied as an ointment. Because sometimes ingestion felt too direct. And yes, it found its way into beer. Before hops became standard, medieval brewers tried all sorts of ingredients. Henbane gave beer a personality. Unfortunately, that personality involved poisoning. Eventually, authorities decided that beer should make people relaxed. Not spiritually untethered. Henbane was removed from brewing, one of history's earliest food safety victories, achieved entirely by accident. Mandrake, the root with opinions. Mandrake looked like a tiny, contorted human. That alone made people uncomfortable. Naturally, they assumed it was powerful. Mandrake was said to scream when pulled from the earth. A scream so deadly it could kill a man. This posed a problem. The solution was delegation. People tied the root to a dog. Then walked away. History is full of innovation. Mandrake was used as a sedative, anesthetic, and vision inducer. It could knock someone unconscious before surgery. It could provoke vivid dreams. Quiet reminders that nature was not here to help, only to react. Belladonna, beauty, but make it dangerous. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, was famous for beauty. A drop in the eye, dilated pupils. Wide eyes were considered attractive. Side effects included blurred vision, light sensitivity, hallucinations, and sometimes death. Beauty standards have never been gentle. Belladonna numbed pain, induced sleep, and caused intense visions in higher doses. Walls vibrated. Colors deepened. Thoughts wandered off and did not always return. It featured heavily in potions, ointments, and pre-surgery preparations, back when surgery involved holding someone down and hoping for speed. Ointments, potions, and poor decisions. Medieval intoxication wasn't always eaten or drunk. Often, it was applied. Ointments mixed plant extracts with animal fat. They were absorbed through the skin, especially areas with efficient absorption. This method was intense, fast, and deeply unsettling. These mixtures produced sensations of floating, flying, and leaving the body, which explains a lot about medieval witch trial testimonies. The experiences were real. The interpretations were questionable. Smoke, incense, and accidental trance. Churches burned incense constantly. Frankincense and myrrh filled the air. They smelled holy. They also altered mood. Prolonged exposure caused calm, mild euphoria, and dreamlike focus. Add fasting, chanting, and exhaustion, and visions were inevitable. Divine inspiration, or mildly altered brain chemistry. History politely looked the other way. Alcohol, the reliable companion. Water wasn't safe. Alcohol was. Small beer was consumed daily. By everyone that it kept people alive. Mildly buzzed. And hydrated. Stronger drinks dulled pain, softened grief, and blurred reality. Which was often preferred? Wine was spiced. Ale was fortified. Mead sweetened bad days. Alcohol wasn't escape. It was maintenance. Ergot, when breakfast went sideways. Sometimes intoxication wasn't chosen. Ergot fungus grew on rye. It looked harmless. It was not. Ergot caused hallucinations, convulsions, burning sensations, and mass panic. Entire villages suffered at once. People believed they were cursed. In reality, they were eating haunted bread. This happened repeatedly. No one connected the dots for centuries. History, once again, was not in a hurry. And so, medieval intoxication wasn't about rebellion or excess. It was about coping. With pain. With boredom. With a world that offered very little relief. People experimented because they had to. Because life was loud, cold, and uncomfortably real. And occasionally. Because curiosity won. So as you rest here, with light, warmth, and no risk of accidentally ingesting a prophetic mushroom, remember. History didn't survive because people were wise. It survived because they were adaptable. And occasionally. Just lucky enough to wake up afterward. Now let your thoughts slow. Let the images fade. History will wait. Sleep does not need witnesses. As the medieval world drifted deeper into routine, something curious began to happen. People didn't seek intoxication for excitement. They sought numbness. Life was repetitive. Wake up. Work. Ache. Sleep, if luck allowed. And when something, a herb, a drink, a smoke, softened that repetition, it wasn't celebrated. It was tolerated. Quietly. Like rain. Most medieval intoxication occurred not in dramatic bursts, but in small, ongoing doses, layered gently over daily life like dust on a shelf no one bothered to wipe. A monk sipping herb-steeped wine before evening prayers. A midwife chewing a root while walking between homes. A farmer drinking ale strong enough to blur the day just enough to make tomorrow tolerable. No fanfare. No intention. Just survival with slightly fuzzier edges. In monasteries, substances were handled with an air of restraint that bordered on denial. Monks brewed beer. They documented herbs. They understood effects. And then, very carefully, they avoided discussing why certain prayers felt easier after certain drinks. Beer was considered nourishment. Wine, sacrament. Herbal tinctures, medicine. If visions happened, that was God's concern. Monastic life was quiet, disciplined, and unintentionally ideal for altered states. Long periods of silence. Fasting. Repetitive chanting. Combine that with fermented grain and resin smoke, and consciousness softened naturally. It wasn't intoxication. It was enhancement. Meanwhile, outside stone walls and scripted prayer, villages lived by a different rhythm. Alehouses existed everywhere. Not places of celebration, places of pause. People drank together not to forget, but to rest inside each other for a while. Stories were told slowly. Arguments ended faster. Songs were half remembered. Children drank watered beer. It was safer than water and calmer than fear. Nobody questioned it. If the child slept better afterward, that was considered a success. In rural areas, herbal knowledge traveled sideways, not upward. No books. No formal study. Just repetition. This root helps sleep. That leaf eases pain. Don't touch that one unless you're already dying. Wisdom was pragmatic. Unromantic. If something worked more than it killed, it stayed in rotation. If it killed too quickly, it earned a story instead. That's how most medieval pharmacology evolved. Occasionally, an herb misbehaved spectacularly. Someone brewed tea too strong. Someone confused plants that looked similar but absolutely were not. The resulting episode would be remembered vaguely. He screamed a bit. She spoke to angels. They tied him to the bed until morning. And then life continued. Medieval society had a remarkable tolerance for unpredictability. There was no expectation of control, only endurance. Now and then, intoxication became public. Festivals. Holy days. Seasonal rites. Ale flowed freely. Wine sweetened with herbs moved through crowds. People danced, poorly. Argued, passionately. Forgot, temporarily. Authorities tolerated it because total sobriety was not practical. A controlled release was preferable to quiet despair. Then there were the healers. Barber surgeons. Midwives. Physicians who believed in humors, balance, and optimism. Pain management was essential. Surgery involved cutting flesh with no anesthesia in the modern sense. So they reached for poppy juice. Alcohol. Mandrake wine. The goal wasn't comfort. It was unconsciousness. If the patient screamed less, the medicine worked. That was the standard. Sleep itself was treated as a fragile state. People slept in short segments. Woke in the night. Prayed. Drank something mild. Certain herbs were prized simply because they quieted the mind. Not erased thoughts, just slowed them. An early understanding of what insomnia feels like when the world is cold and unforgiving. Fear shaped intoxication as much as need. Too much altered perception looked like sin. Too vivid a vision attracted suspicion. People learned to keep experiences private. If you saw something extraordinary, you did not tell everyone. You told no one. This was how folk knowledge survived, quietly, invisibly. Over time, medieval intoxication became embedded in routine rather than rebellion. It wasn't escape. It was adjustment. A gentle dulling of edges. A way to make stone beds feel softer. To make hunger speak more quietly. To make time pass at a manageable pace, and that's something we often forget. They weren't searching for pleasure. They were managing existing conditions. Pain. Cold. Fear. Endless repetition. Substances didn't add joy. They reduced suffering. That was enough. So as we drift here, safe, warm, listening, remember. History didn't need to be exciting to continue. It only needed to be endurable. And the medieval world, with all its strange plants and accidental hallucinations, found ways to endure. Sometimes wisely. Sometimes dangerously. Sometimes just barely. And that was enough. Let your thoughts settle now. No need to hold on to names or facts. They'll stay behind. Sleep, after all, has always been humanity's most reliable escape. Even in the Middle Ages. Even now that as night settled over medieval towns, sound changed. Daytime noise, metal, animals, shouting, softened into coughs, footsteps, distant laughter from an alehouse where someone had already had one drink too many and was carefully pretending they hadn't. Darkness arrived early in the Middle Ages. Candles were expensive. So was oil. People surrendered to night more willingly than we do now. And night had its own chemistry. In the hours before sleep, people reached for rituals. Not dramatic ones, small, practical habits. A warm drink. A prayer recited half from memory. An herb added to broth not because it tasted good, but because it helped. Sleep was never guaranteed. Beds were hard. Rooms were crowded. Cold crept in through stone and wood alike. If an herb could dull discomfort or slow racing thoughts, it was welcomed like an old friend who didn't ask questions. There is a myth that medieval people were constantly drunk. They weren't. They were consistently mild. Alcohol was part of life, not an event, a soft blur over consciousness. Never sharp enough to fully escape. Just enough to take the edge off existence. You didn't drink to forget who you were. You drank to forget the ache in your shoulders. Herbs entered sleep quietly. Valerian. Poppy. Hops. Hops, before they dominated beer, were used for calm. They settled nerves. Encouraged rest. Only later did someone realize they also preserved beer exceptionally well. History loves accidents that improve shelf life. In homes without clocks, intoxication also shaped time. There was no late. Only darker. Drinks thickened evenings, stretched conversations, loosened memory. A night could feel long or short depending on what had been consumed. And memory was already unreliable. Why make it worse? Because sometimes dull memory was preferable to sharp reality. Travelers relied on substances even more. Roads were dangerous. Beds uncertain. Water suspicious. A cup of ale was safer than a stream. A spiced wine calmed nerves after a long day of being observed by strangers with unclear intentions. Inns smelled of smoke, sweat, and old stories. Drinks were communal. Refusing a shared cup was rude. Accepting it meant trust, even if the brew tasted like bark and optimism. Then there were soldiers. Pain, fear, boredom. Alcohol was essential. Before battle. After injury. Between campaigns. Not to celebrate. To function. Painkillers weren't precise. They were generous. Better too much numbness than too much awareness. Markets bustled with substances disguised as convenience. Herbs sold alongside food. Powders wrapped in cloth. Tinctures poured from bottles with no labels and a lot of confidence. Apothecaries spoke calmly, as if the contents weren't potentially transformative. Dosage was suggested, not enforced. Trust was assumed. Occasionally, that trust was misplaced. A potion worked too well. A drink caused laughter where sleep had been promised. Someone wandered. Someone didn't remember how they got home. These weren't crimes, they were inconveniences. Even the church struggled with boundaries. Visions happened. Some were praised. Some were investigated. How could you tell divine inspiration from altered perception? The answer often depended on status. A peasant with visions was unstable. A monk with visions was blessed. Chemistry was democratic. Interpretation was not. Medieval law rarely addressed intoxication directly. Unless it caused violence. Then it was ignored slightly less. Drunkenness excused behavior, sometimes. Other times it made punishment harsher. Consistency was not a medieval priority. As centuries passed, awareness grew slowly. Patterns were noticed. Too much of certain plants caused predictable outcomes. Still, no one understood why. Science wasn't ready. So intuition filled the gap. And intuition said, "Less next time." That was progress. There was also shame. Being too altered threatened dignity. Even exhaustion had expectations. A little blurred was acceptable. Lost was not. So people calibrated carefully. Small doses. Familiar sources. Known results. Repetition built safety. What fascinates us today is not how reckless medieval people were, but how adaptive. They learned through experience. Through failure. Through living long enough to try again differently. So as this slow, meandering history continues to hum in the background, consider this. Intoxication wasn't a deviation from medieval life. It was woven into it. Quietly. Casually. Without drama. It filled the spaces where comfort did not exist. And when it failed, they endured anyway. Let your breathing slow. Nothing new is coming that you need to catch. History keeps going whether we notice it or not. And you don't need to stay awake to follow it. That's the luxury we have now. Sleep can come gently. Even if the past rarely allowed it, morning, when it finally arrived, did not feel like a clean reset. It felt like continuation. Light crept in through shutters that never quite closed properly. Cold lingered in corners. Smoke clung to hair and wool from the night before. If someone had drunk too deeply, it showed quietly. Slower movements. A longer pause before standing. A moment spent staring at nothing in particular. No one commented. Everyone understood. Breakfast was practical. Bread that might be fresh or might not. Cheese of uncertain personality. Ale, small, weak, dependable. Drinking in the morning wasn't indulgence. It was insurance. Against thirst. Against illness. Against the idea that the body should feel alert before it was ready. If herbs had been taken the night before, their echoes remained. A faint calm. A heaviness behind the eyes. Nothing alarming. Just life settling back into place. Work resumed without ceremony. Fields didn't care about sleep quality. Workshops didn't care about dreams. Hands learned to function even while the mind lagged behind. This is something medieval life demanded. The ability to act while awareness drifted slightly out of phase. And in that space, between full clarity and complete exhaustion, substances did their quiet work. Not changing the world. Just smoothing its roughest edges. Midday brought heat, when the season allowed it. Heat changed everything. It intensified effects. Made ale feel heavier. Made wine loosen tongues faster. People adjusted instinctively. More water when possible. Less spice. Shorter pauses under shade. Learning without instruction. Healers paid close attention to timing. The same herb could soothe at dusk. And disorient at noon. Dosage mattered. But so did sunlight. Food. Mood. They didn't speak in chemistry. They spoke in observation. This one is better at night. Not on an empty stomach. Never during heat. Rules passed softly, person to person. And always, there was caution, not fear. Caution. Everyone knew someone who had taken too much. Misjudged a brew. Trusted the wrong route. Stories circulated quietly. They weren't warnings. They were reminders. Nature gave generously. But she did not negotiate. As evening approached again, behavior shifted. Work slowed. Voices softened. Alehouses filled gradually, not suddenly. No rush. Just presence. A place to sit. To rest the spine. To let the day drain away in stages. Drinking was rarely solitary. That wasn't safe. Being altered was easier when witnessed. Community acted as balance. Songs emerged, not rehearsed, not polished. Familiar melodies bent under tired voices. Lyrics were forgotten halfway through. No one corrected them. Accuracy was less important than continuity. By the time night returned, people were ready for it. Not eager. But accepting. Another candle lit. Another small ritual repeated. A drink. A prayer. An herb added without ceremony. Sleep was invited, not demanded. And if sleep didn't come, that was all right too. Someone would lie still. Listen to breathing around them. Let thoughts wander without chasing them. The mind, gently dulled, eventually surrendered. This is the rhythm medieval people lived inside. Not dramatic. Not reckless. Measured. Adaptive. A constant negotiation between discomfort and endurance. And now, here, we mirror it in our own way. Listening. Letting the world blur softly. Nothing more to remember. History will carry itself forward, as it always has. You don't need to follow. Just rest. Sleep, when it came in the medieval world, was not a single deep plunge. It arrived in pieces. Short stretches. Light drifting. Waking without alarm. People slept, woke, slept again. The night was long. There was no rush to escape it. And in those quiet hours between sleeps, consciousness behaved oddly. Dreams bled into wakefulness. Thoughts wandered without needing direction. If herbs or drink were still working through the body, this boundary softened further. Not hallucination exactly. More like suggestion. Shadows moved when you didn't fully watch them. Sound stretched, then faded. No one panicked. This was normal. Dreams were taken seriously. Not dramatically, but attentively. A vivid dream meant something. What, exactly, depended on who you asked. A priest might say it was a message. A healer might say the poppy worked. Most people simply noted it and moved on. Dream interpretation was not obsessed over. It was accepted as another side effect of being human. Night noises carried weight. A cart rolling far away, a dog barking once, then stopping. With senses already softened, every sound felt larger. Alcohol and herbs didn't erase fear. They dulled its edges. Made it manageable. Enough to sleep through a distant shout. Not enough to ignore real danger. Balance mattered. There is something modern listeners often misunderstand. Medieval people did not seek to escape reality completely. They couldn't afford to. Reality demanded attention. So substances were used with restraint, even when knowledge was limited. Not because they were wise. But because consequences were immediate. Morning came again, as it always did. repeating the cycle. This repetition shaped tolerance. Bodies learned. Minds adjusted. What shocked once became familiar. A brew that caused dizziness last year was now simply strong. Experience created calibration. Over generations, this led to quiet expertise. Certain families were known for good ale. Others for calming teas. Some for remedies that worked just well enough to trust. Reputation mattered. Mistakes traveled faster than success. Now and then, outside influence arrived. A merchant from another region. A soldier returning home. A monk translating a distant text. New substances entered slowly. Curiosity met caution. Try a little. That was always the rule. And when something was clearly too much, it faded out of use. Not banned. Not erased. Just avoided. People talked less about it. Let it return to the ground. What remains striking is how intimate all of this was. Substances weren't distant products. They were grown. Gathered. Prepared by hand. People knew what went into their bodies. Not scientifically. But personally. Each plant had a history. Each effect had a story. So when we think of medieval intoxication, we should imagine something quieter than myth. Not chaos. Not excess. Just a slow adjustment of consciousness to make life livable. And now, as your own thoughts soften, you're doing something not entirely different. Letting focus fade. Letting awareness blur gently. No danger here. No cold stone floors. No uncertain brews. Just history fading into the background. And sleep, if it arrives, is welcome. Over time, these habits became invisible. No one announced they were using something to ease the day. There was no word for it that felt separate from living. You drank what was there. You ate what grew. You slept when the body allowed it. Altered states weren't destinations. They were side effects. Children grew up watching this rhythm. They learned early that tiredness was normal. That aches were expected. That a warm drink could soften both. No lectures. No explanations. Just imitation, and slowly, quietly, the knowledge passed on. Elderly villagers often carried the most trust. Not because they were wise in theory, but because they had survived. If someone said that one helped sleep, and they had wrinkles and steady hands, people listened. Experience outranked confidence. There were failures, of course. Bad harvests. Molded grain. Too little food mixed with too much brew. Bodies responded immediately. Illness swept through rooms faster than ideas. When that happened, people pulled back. Less this time. Something else instead. Adjustment through discomfort. It's easy to imagine medieval life as reckless because records highlight extremes. Trial transcripts. Sermons. Warnings. But daily life was quieter. More careful. People didn't experiment for fun. They experimented because nothing came with instructions. Every meal was a small gamble. Every remedy a calculated hope. And substances, herbal, fermented, smoked, were part of that calculation. They fit into life like weather. Sometimes helpful. Sometimes dangerous. Never optional. As centuries rolled forward, subtle changes settled in. Trade routes expanded. Ingredients traveled farther. Sugar appeared. Spices multiplied. Drinks grew sweeter. Potions more elaborate. But the mindset stayed the same. If it eased the day without ruining tomorrow, it stayed. Meanwhile, sleep remained imperfect. Even with herbs, even with ale, even with exhaustion. People woke in the night. They lay awake listening. They accepted it. Sleep was not something to optimize. It was something to receive when offered. That acceptance softened anxiety. There was no fear of not sleeping enough. There was no clock demanding productivity. The body decided. And substances simply nudged it, occasionally. In this way, medieval intoxication mirrors something universal. Not indulgence. Not rebellion. Adaptation. The slow shaping of experience to fit the limits of a difficult world. Now, let your mind do the same. There is no finish line here. No conclusion waiting. History doesn't end. It recedes. Like a sound growing farther away. Still present. Just not demanding attention. If your thoughts drift, let them. If sleep comes, accept it. Nothing important is being missed. The past has already happened. You don't need to stay awake for it that as seasons turned, the relationship with substances shifted subtly. Winter made everything heavier. Cold demanded warmth from the inside out. Drinks grew thicker. Spices sharper. Herbs chosen more for comfort than curiosity. A brew in winter wasn't about effect. It was about survival. Something warm in the body meant another night endured. Summer, by contrast, required restraint. Heat amplified everything. Too much ale under the sun slowed workers dangerously. Too strong a herb caused dizziness when balance mattered. So quantities shrank. Strength softened. Adaptation again, without theory. Festivals punctuated the year like deep breaths. Moments when rules bent gently. Drink flowed more freely. Laughter arrived faster. But even then, excess was temporary. There was work tomorrow. Always work tomorrow, and bodies remembered consequences better than excitement. Substances also shaped memory of time. Years didn't blur because of intoxication. They blurred because days were similar. What stood out were extremes. An illness. A strange dream. A night when something hit harder than expected. Those moments lingered. Everything else faded. This is why medieval accounts feel dramatic. They recorded what broke rhythm. Not what sustained it. The quiet evenings. The mild drinks. The herbs that simply worked. Those didn't need writing down. What history leaves us is imbalance. A record skewed toward danger and mystery. But lived reality leaned toward moderation. Survival favors stability. As awareness grew, certain substances gained reputations. Some became, for sleep. Others, for pain. A few were whispered about and avoided except in desperation. Language adjusted. Not names for chemicals. But moods. Calm. Heavy. Warm. Unsettling. Descriptions rooted in feeling, not science. When someone said, "That one feels wrong," it mattered. Because feelings were early warning systems. Over generations, bodies themselves adapted. Tolerance developed. Expectations shifted. What once induced visions now induced drowsiness. Intensity dulled with familiarity. The world rarely stays shocking for long. And when shock was desired. During rituals, ceremonies, long prayers. Context changed. Fasting. Silence. Darkness. The same substance behaved differently. Environment mattered. Always had. None of this was discussed in the way we discuss things now. No debates. No moral panics framed as science. Just lived experience. And adjustment. As we sit here. Or lie here. We mirror that pace. No instructions needed. Just letting awareness soften naturally. History drifts on its own. You don't need to carry it. Let it hum quietly in the distance. Like a fire settling after embers cool. Sleep doesn't need permission. It arrives when the body is ready. As years passed, people became less curious about why something worked and more attentive to when it should be used. Knowledge narrowed instead of expanding. Not out of ignorance, but efficiency. Life rewarded what was reliable. Certain drinks became associated with certain moments. Ale after work. Spiced wine in illness. Herbal infusions before sleep. The body learned these patterns. Expectation softened the effect before the substance ever did. Ritual mattered as much as chemistry. There were evenings when nothing was taken at all. Not because of discipline, but because nothing felt necessary. Fatigue alone carried the body toward rest. Those nights were remembered as ordinary. Which is to say, they were forgotten. In some homes, shelves held small collections. Bundles of dried leaves, roots wrapped in cloth. Bottles with corks that never quite fit. They weren't labeled, everyone knew what they were. Knowledge didn't require writing when repetition did the work, when mistakes happened, and they did. They spread quietly. Someone spoke too long. Someone stared too hard at the fire. The room noticed. Adjustments followed. Not judgment. Just care. A blanket placed gently. A cup of water. No drama. Over time, society developed a shared tolerance for unpredictability. People expected things to occasionally go wrong. A poor reaction didn't signal danger to the whole system. Just a reminder to be attentive. This flexibility kept things functioning. And so medieval life continued. Neither ignorant nor enlightened. Just lived. Day by day. Now, notice how your own attention behaves. Thoughts may come slower. Or not at all. That's fine. Nothing here needs your response. History doesn't ask questions. It simply passes by. If sleep comes, welcome it. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Night has always been long. And the past has always waited patiently for us to look away. There was, in the medieval mind, an acceptance that the body was never fully under control. It ached. It tired. It reacted strangely to the world. Substances were not tools to dominate the body. They were negotiations. A way of asking, gently. Can we make this a little easier? Sometimes the body agreed. Sometimes it didn't. And when it didn't, people adjusted their expectations instead of their chemistry. Silence played a role too. Long stretches of it. No background hum of machines. No constant voices. In that quiet, even mild alterations felt noticeable. A softened sense of time. A warmth spreading slowly. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to feel different from before. Firelight changed perception. Shadows stretched. Faces softened. A drink or herb combined with low light could feel stronger than it actually was. No one separated environment from effect. They were experienced as one. In shared sleeping spaces, breathing set the rhythm. Dozens of people settling at different speeds. Some snored quickly. Some lay awake, listening. A faint scent of herbs in the air. Fermentation lingering on breath. Sleep arrived not as silence, but as gradual surrender. This collective rhythm made moderation almost automatic. Someone always noticed if a person drifted too far. Community acted as a boundary. Isolation was rare. And isolation, when it happened, was considered more dangerous than intoxication. Over long winters, stories filled the gap. Tales told softly while hands worked. Occasionally, a story bent strangely. Someone insisted they'd seen something while half asleep. Something vivid. No one rushed to explain. Belief wasn't required. Listening was enough. Memory was flexible. What mattered stayed. What didn't, faded. Substances blurred the line between intentional forgetting and natural loss. Both were accepted. As generations passed, nothing felt radical anymore. What once felt experimental became tradition. And tradition rarely questions itself. Now, your own awareness may feel similar. Less sharp. Less concerned with sequence. That's fine. History doesn't need structure to continue. It's comfortable meandering. If you notice your breathing slowing, let it. If your thoughts thin out, let them. You don't need to be present for everything. The medieval world certainly wasn't. We'll keep going quietly, without asking anything of you. Sleep, when it comes, will not interrupt history. It will simply overlap with it. There were days when nothing unusual happened at all. No strange dreams. No blurred edges. No warmth spreading through the chest. Just ordinary tiredness. Those days were not disappointing. They were reassuring. Normal meant safe. Medieval people trusted what repeated itself. A drink that behaved the same way each time. An herb that calmed without surprise. A routine that delivered sleep more often than not. Surprise was expensive. Predictability was comfort. When someone felt unwell in a way they couldn't name, they rarely searched for a cause. They treated the feeling, not the mystery. Something warm. Something bitter. Something familiar. There were days when nothing unusual happened at all. No strange dreams. No blurred edges. No warmth spreading through the chest. Just ordinary tiredness. Those days were not disappointing. They were reassuring. Normal meant safe. Medieval people trusted what repeated itself. A drink that behaved the same way each time. An herb that calmed without surprise. A routine that delivered sleep more often than not. Surprise was expensive. Predictability was comfort. When someone felt unwell in a way they couldn't name, they rarely searched for a cause. They treated the feeling, not the mystery. Something warm. Something bitter, something familiar. The goal was not understanding. The goal was easing through. Even fear had its place. A substance that caused unease was remembered as such. Not condemned, just avoided unless necessary. People respected discomfort as information. The body spoke more honestly than theory. Season after season, the rhythm held. Work. Rest. Small adjustments to consciousness. No one was chasing peak experience. They were chasing manageable ones. In this way, medieval intoxication rarely escalated. There was no ladder of intensity to climb. Just a circle. You returned to what worked. This circular nature shaped memory too. People remembered sensations, not dosages. This makes the night pass quickly. This makes dreams heavy. This one helps me wake less. Language stayed close to feeling. Abstract explanation came much later. As villages aged, so did their habits. What a grandparent used still sat on the shelf. Not because it was best. But because it was known. Familiarity was its own proof. Now and then, things changed quietly. A new plant arrived. A different method spread. It didn't replace everything at once. It slid in gently. Nothing rushed. And when death came, as it often did, it was not blamed on the substance unless it had clearly misbehaved. Life itself was unstable. People didn't expect consistency. Only moments of relief. That expectation shapes how we should imagine the past. Not frantic. Not indulgent. Patient. Enduring. Your own body, listening now, understands patience. There is no deadline. No lesson. Just time unfolding slowly. If your thoughts drift in and out, that's exactly right. That's how evenings passed for centuries. Awake. Almost asleep. Not worrying about the difference. History continues to breathe quietly in the background. You don't need to follow its details anymore. Let it fade. Sleep is welcome. And nothing important will be lost if you take it now. At some point, effort stopped being applied to the night. People didn't try to fix it anymore. They accepted that sleep arrived when it arrived. And when it didn't, they rested without sleeping. Lying still was not failure. It was participation. Darkness itself did work on the mind. Without light, thoughts slowed. Not because they became wiser, but because there was less for them to hold on to. No pages to read. No faces to study. Just the ceiling. Or the beams. Or the vague sense of space above. In those moments, memory loosened. The mind wandered through familiar paths. Not stories with beginnings and endings. Just fragments. A field. A sound that a smell carried briefly and then gone. No one tried to organize this drift. Letting go was easier than steering. Sleep, when it came, often came in pieces. Waking in the middle of the night was normal. Expected. Sometimes people spoke softly. Sometimes they prayed. Sometimes they did nothing at all. The night was not a single block. It was a sequence of quiet intervals. Eventually, the body tired of being awake. Even without help. Even without intention. And rest settled in again, lightly. This pattern repeated itself across centuries. Unremarkable, unrecorded. Because nothing unusual requires explanation. What modern minds call disruption, medieval minds called evening. They did not measure efficiency. They experienced duration. That's why so little was written about sleep itself. You don't write about air. You don't write about darkness. You live inside it. And now, in this moment, that same darkness is doing its old work. Slowing. Softening. Reducing the need to decide. Nothing here demands memory. Nothing needs completion. History has already been lived. It doesn't need witnesses anymore. Only breath. Only time. If awareness fades, let it fade. If it returns briefly, let it pass. The rhythm does not change. It never has. There was a quiet understanding that the night belonged to itself. You did not conquer it. You did not manage it. You moved through it gently, the way you move through water when you don't know how deep it is. People noticed small things instead. The way the fire dimmed on its own. How shadows stopped shifting once everyone went still. How even insects tired of movement. These signs mattered more than the hour. Breathing slowed naturally when nothing demanded it. Not controlled. Not guided. Just allowed. And the body followed that permission willingly. Thoughts, when they appeared, grew less demanding. They no longer argued. They simply passed by, like familiar roads seen from a distance. No urge to walk them again. In these moments, identity softened. You were not your work, not your role. Not even your worries. Just a body resting in place. That was enough. Medieval knights taught this without instruction. Without books. By repetition alone. Night after night, the same lesson. You do not need to be alert to exist. Even discomfort was tolerated differently. A stiff limb. A chill in the air. They were acknowledged, not resisted. Resistance required energy. And energy was precious. So people adjusted. Pulled a cloak closer. Shifted slightly. And then returned to stillness. That small correction was considered success. Somewhere between stillness and sleep, awareness thinned. Sound stretched, time widened. There was no pressure to cross fully into dreams. Eventually, even attention grows tired of itself. It stops reaching outward. Stops checking. Stops asking whether anything important has been missed. Nothing has. There never was anything urgent hiding in the quiet. The body understands this long before the mind does. Muscles loosen without permission. The jaw releases. Hands grow heavy. Not because you told them to, but because they've done enough for one day. In medieval rooms, this moment passed unnoticed. No one marked it. No one celebrated it. It simply happened. Like the cooling of bread after baking. Like embers fading to ash. Natural processes don't announce themselves. Sound thins further. Not silence. Just less. A distant shift. A breath that isn't yours. Then nothing worth following. Thoughts no longer connect. They appear without context and leave without explanation. That is the mind letting go of its grip. Not failing. Resting. Even dreams, when they begin, arrive gently. Not stories yet. Just sensations. Movement without direction. Images without meaning. The mind practicing being unstructured. In the past, this space wasn't feared. It was familiar. People entered it every night, whether they wanted to or not. No language was built around it. It didn't need one. And here you are, touching the same edge. You don't have to step fully across. You don't have to stay. Either way is fine. Time feels different now. Shorter. Longer. Neither matters. Duration loosens when awareness thins. Nothing is being demanded of you. No memory to keep. No insight to carry forward. Just rest, in whatever form it takes. The past drifts on its own now, slow. Unconcerned that at a certain point, even the idea of continuing becomes unnecessary. The night doesn't move forward. It deepens. Like water growing still when the wind finally loses interest. Medieval people sensed this deepening without naming it. They felt the house settle. The world pause. As if everything had agreed. For a little while. To stop asking for attention. In that stillness, the past and present blurred. Tomorrow didn't exist yet. Yesterday had already loosened its hold. There was only now, stretched thin and gentle. It didn't matter who you were during the day. Titles dissolved. Responsibilities softened. Night treated everyone the same. A body resting. A breath repeating. Nothing else required. This is why worry rarely stayed sharp after dark. It lost contrast. Without light, even problems felt flatter. Still present, but quieter. The mind learned to drift not because it was taught. But because there was nowhere else to go. No signal. No instruction. Just dimness and time. Sleep was not conquered. It was met halfway. And if it didn't arrive fully, that was acceptable. Rest existed in layers. Now, those layers are here too. Light rest. Deeper rest. Moments of nothing at all. You may move between them without noticing. That's how it works. History doesn't end. It just grows indistinct. Edges blur. Details soften. Eventually, it becomes background. A low hum beneath awareness. You don't have to listen anymore. Your body already remembers what to do. Every breath teaches it again. There is no signal to wait for. No cue you might miss. If sleep comes, let it. If it doesn't, let that be enough. The night is patient. It has always been, eventually, even the sense of listening fades. Not because anything stops. But because the need to follow along dissolves. The night doesn't require witnesses. It simply exists. In medieval homes, this was the hour when everything felt settled. No more adjustments. No more small movements. Cloaks stayed where they were. Bodies accepted their position. Stillness became familiar enough to feel safe. Breath found its own rhythm. Not slow on purpose. Not deep for any reason. Just even, like waves that no longer reach the shore with force. Thoughts lost their edges. They no longer arrived in sentences, just soft impressions. A warmth, a dim image. Then nothing that needed holding. People didn't wonder if they were doing sleep correctly. They trusted tiredness. They trusted time. And time always did its part. Outside, the world was doing the same. Animals quiet. Paths empty. Fields resting under darkness without knowing they were fields at all. Inside, awareness narrowed. From room. To body. To breath. Until even breath stopped being interesting. This narrowing wasn't loss. It was relief. So much effort was no longer required. And now, in this moment, the same easing is available. You don't have to sink deeper. You don't have to stay where you are. Both are fine. Nothing important is waiting. Nothing meaningful depends on this moment being used well. It's allowed to pass unnoticed. Most moments always were. History drifts quietly now. No scenes. No lessons. Just a steady, distant continuity. If sleep takes you, let it. If rest is all that comes, let that be enough. The night accepts both without preference. At this depth of night, effort no longer makes sense. Trying to sleep feels stranger than simply lying still. So people stopped trying. They trusted the weight of their own bodies against wood, straw, stone. Gravity had never failed them before. In medieval rooms, nothing was perfectly comfortable. And yet, comfort appeared anyway. Not as softness, but as familiarity. The body adapts to what it knows. Time loosened completely here. Moments no longer lined up. They overlapped. A thought might begin without finishing. A memory might surface without context. No one chased coherence. Coherence belonged to daylight. Even discomfort softened when ignored. Cold became background. Ache became distant. Attention, once withdrawn, changed everything. This was not sleep yet. It was something gentler. A state where nothing required response. Where being awake carried no responsibility. Sometimes, a sound would drift through wind along the wall. Wood shifting as it cooled, the mind noted it, then let it go. No alarm. No meaning assigned. Meaning sleeps early. It always has. Eventually, awareness became thin enough to fold. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like fabric settling where it naturally wants to rest. Dreams, if they arrived softly. Not as stories. As impressions. Color without shape. Movement without destination. The mind practicing not having to explain itself. And sometimes there were no dreams at all. Just blank rest. Which medieval people did not fear. They didn't need inner worlds every night. Rest without imagery was still rest. Now, this same permission exists. You don't need thoughts. You don't need images. You don't need to go anywhere. Let the night hold what you release. It has held centuries already. Breaths. Bodies. Unfinished days. Nothing here needs remembering. Nothing here is fragile. You're allowed to disappear into rest for a while. The world will continue without comment. As it always has, the body settles first. The mind follows later. That's how it has always worked, even when people pretended otherwise. In medieval nights, stillness was not empty. It was full of small sensations that asked for no reaction. Breath moving. Blood warming the hands again. The faint awareness of weight distributed, supported. No screens. No alerts. No sudden calls to attention. Just existence, reduced to its simplest form. People didn't label this moment. There was no word for it. No, wind down. No, sleep hygiene. It simply happened when the day had taken all it could. Thoughts slowed because there was nowhere for them to go. No future to plan. No schedules waiting. Tomorrow would arrive when it arrived. Worry didn't disappear, it just lost momentum. Even regret grew quiet. There was nothing left to adjust. What happened had already happened, the body accepted that long before the mind did. Here, memory softened its grip. Not erased. Not rewritten, just placed gently to the side. Like tools set down after work, breathing found a rhythm of its own. Not deep. Not forced. Steady enough to forget about. This is the space medieval nights returned people to. Again and again. A neutral state. Neither joy nor sorrow. Just, existing without pressure. When sleep finally came, it was rarely dramatic. No surrender. No collapse. Awareness simply thinned until it wasn't necessary anymore. Like a candle not blown out, just no longer fed. If dreams entered, they didn't always make sense. And no one expected them to. Dreams weren't messages every night. Sometimes they were only noise. Sometimes only light. Sometimes nothing at all. And when nothing came, that was fine too. Silence was not empty. It was restorative. So if your thoughts feel distant now, that's not failure. If they come and go without meaning, that's not a problem. If awareness flickers instead of focusing, that's exactly right. You don't need to witness sleep. You don't need to remember falling into it. Sleep doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. The past knew this instinctively. And the body remembers, even when the mind forgets. Let everything become less defined. Edges soften. Details blur. Nothing important depends on clarity now. Night continues doing what it has always done. Holding the world while it rests. And you are part of that quiet arrangement. No effort required. Just let it happen. Long before anyone measured sleep or worried about its quality, people simply rested when the world dimmed enough to allow it. There was no ambition in rest. No goal. Just permission. Medieval nights were patient. They didn't rush you toward unconsciousness. They waited. The mind, freed from usefulness, began to wander in slow loops. Not stories. Not plans. Fragments. A smell remembered. A sound without a source. A face without a name. Nothing demanded explanation. In that half-state, identity softened. You weren't your role anymore. Not a worker. Not a parent. Not a traveler. Not someone with obligations. Just a body existing in darkness. That was enough. Pain, when noticed, became oddly distant. Not gone. Just unimportant. As if the body said, "I'll deal with this later." Time stopped behaving. Minutes stretched or vanished entirely. No one cared. You couldn't be late to sleep. Outside, animals settled too. Stables quieted. Dogs stopped shifting. Birds tucked sound inside themselves. Even pests obeyed the rhythm of dark. Inside, breath became the only movement worth noticing. Each inhale arrived without effort. Each exhale left without resistance. There was nothing to improve. Eventually, attention became optional. Thoughts appeared without being followed. Sensations passed without being named. Awareness itself loosened. This is where control ends naturally. Not surrendered. Not forced. Just, no longer held. Centuries of people reached this place nightly. Not because they studied it. But because they trusted it. Trust that sleep would come. Trust that the body knew how. Trust that the world would still exist in the morning. You don't need to prove wakefulness. No one is watching. Nothing is being evaluated. Even if sleep doesn't arrive immediately, rest still works. Stillness still repairs. Silence still nourishes. So let the drift continue. Let the line between thinking and not thinking blur. Let the night do the only thing it ever asks to do. Carry you gently into not needing to notice anymore. Eventually, the mind stops offering commentary. Not because it was silenced, but because it lost its audience. No one was listening anymore. This is where nights grow very old. They feel the same now as they did 1,000 years ago. Dark does not evolve. Quiet does not innovate. It simply remains. In medieval homes, there was often a pause in the night. A brief waking. Eyes opening without reason. This was normal. People didn't fear it, they might turn. Shift straw. Say a prayer out of habit. Then let go again. Sleep was not a single block. It was a tide. Coming in. Pulling back. Returning when ready. You didn't describe it. You simply passed through it, night after night. The body begins small repairs. Quiet ones. Nothing dramatic. Muscles release what they carried too long. The jaw loosens. The brow forgets how to tense. No instruction required. Even identity becomes optional. You are no longer someone having a night. You are simply rest happening. Breath continues. But it feels far away now. Something observed once, then forgotten. Like waves heard from another room. If awareness tries to rise, it does so gently. And then settles again. There is no urgency left in it. This is where effort would feel unnatural. Where trying to stay awake would be harder than letting go. In the medieval world, this was when households fully disappeared. No fires stoked. No prayers begun. Just bodies existing quietly in the dark. Together. Apart. It didn't matter. Rest was communal even when experienced alone. Outside, the night deepened without comment. Stars didn't impress anyone anymore. Dark was simply doing its job. This is the point where memory unhooks completely. If you try to recall how long you've been here, you couldn't. And there's no reason to. Time has become irrelevant. Sleep approaches not as an event, but as a condition you gradually meet. Like water rising around you until there's nowhere else to stand. Nothing pulls you under. You drift. And if this were centuries ago, no one would worry about you here. They would trust the process, the same one that carried their grandparents. And theirs. And so on, quietly, endlessly. You don't need to hold on to the words anymore. They've done their work. They can fade now. Let attention soften beyond noticing, let the night finish what it's been patiently doing all along. You don't have to go anywhere. Sleep will come to you. At this depth of quiet, even the sense of continuing becomes thin. Nothing is progressing. Nothing is arriving. There is only a gentle staying. The body no longer checks itself. It doesn't ask whether sleep has begun. It doesn't measure comfort. It has returned to an older mode, one that predates explanation. In medieval nights, this was the safest hour. Not because danger disappeared, but because vigilance rested too. The world learned to wait until morning. So did the mind. Thoughts may still surface now and then, but they carry no momentum. They appear, pause, and dissolve before finishing. Like sentences abandoned halfway through, with no need to complete them. Even sound becomes distant. Not quieter, less relevant. A noise can happen without pulling attention toward it. The brain registers, then lets go. This is where effort quietly exits. Trying would feel strange here. Like paddling when the water has stopped moving. Warmth becomes more noticeable than sensation. Not heat. Not pressure. Just a sense of being intact, contained. Long ago, people trusted this state completely. They didn't check the door twice. Didn't replay the day. They let darkness do what it had always done, reduce the world to something manageable. Even fear softened. Fear needs images. Needs anticipation. Here, there is neither. If awareness flickers, that's okay. If it steadies, that's okay too. Nothing is required to change. Sleep is not something you fall into from here. It's something you realize you're already touching. The line between listening and resting blurs. Between noticing and not noticing. Between being present and being absent. This is the space where names disappear. Not just names of things, but the name of you, too. There is still existence. Just without labels. Breath continues somewhere. The heart keeps time somewhere. You don't need to know where. They've done this without supervision before. The night holds everything evenly. No preference. No pressure. At a certain point, even stillness stops feeling like a choice. The body no longer decides to rest. It simply is. Here, awareness behaves differently. It doesn't hold. It doesn't wander. It hovers, light, minimal, barely attached. Like a lantern turned low enough that it no longer casts shadows. In medieval nights, this was when the world felt distant but intact. The future wasn't missing. It was just postponed. Tomorrow existed, but not urgently. People trusted that pause. They didn't fear the absence of thinking. They weren't trained to fill silence. Silence was a companion, not a gap. Muscles finished their last small releases. The hands soften. The tongue rests. The eyes forget they can move. Nothing collapses. Everything just loosens. Breathing becomes background noise of existence itself. You no longer breathe on purpose. You are breathed. Even the sense of listening fades. Sounds pass through without stopping. Thoughts do the same, when they happen at all. This is not deep sleep yet. It's the doorway. The place where the mind stands, already halfway inside. Medieval people rarely named this moment. But they knew it. They returned here every night, and they trusted that what came next would take care of itself. There is no instruction here. No technique. No correction. Trying to do something would pull you backward. So nothing is done. The body forgets the shape of the room. Then forgets the concept of room entirely. Inside and outside gently dissolve. Time loses its edge. Seconds no longer feel measurable. Minutes stop behaving like units. There is only duration without length. If awareness blinks out for a moment, and returns, that's normal. That's the rhythm. Sleep doesn't arrive cleanly. It overlaps. Nothing needs guarding. Nothing needs attention, even concern has gone quiet. The world is functioning without you right now. Safely. Ordinarily. Just as it did for centuries of sleepers before. You don't need to go further. You don't need to let go harder. This depth does the work on its own. If the words begin to blur. If you stop following them. That's not loss. That's arrival. Night continues holding everything steady. And you are resting exactly where you're supposed to be. Quietly. Without effort. Eventually, even the idea of night fades. There is no contrast left between day and dark. Just a gentle, neutral state where nothing presses forward. The body has stopped negotiating. No adjustments. No checking. It has found the position it was looking for all along. In medieval homes, this was when even the smallest movements ceased. No turning. No settling. Just still forms breathing quietly in shared darkness. Nothing remarkable. Nothing missing. Here, awareness thins to a thread. Not broken, just light enough to drift. You may sense it now and then, but it no longer insists on being followed. Thought has become optional. And without thought, emotion rests too. Not happiness. Not sadness. Just neutrality. This is where sleep does not feel like entering somewhere new. It feels like returning to something ancient. Familiar in the body, even if the mind has forgotten. The muscles no longer hold themselves. They are held. By gravity. By warmth. By the simple fact of staying still long enough. Breathing has settled into a pattern older than words, nothing you could improve. Nothing you need to notice. Centuries ago, people trusted this state completely. They didn't fear losing consciousness. They expected it. As naturally as morning light. And if wakefulness flickers briefly, it passes without concern. The night does not scold interruptions. It absorbs them. Here, there is no audience. No performance. No responsibility to remain aware. Sleep begins quietly when you stop checking for it. Not all at once. But enough. If the mind drifts away from the words now, that's exactly right. They were never meant to stay. History doesn't require attention in the dark. It rests too. Let everything soften further. Let the last traces of effort fall away. Nothing is being lost. Only the need to stay awake. The night is steady. The body is safe. The world will still be there later. For now. You rest at this point, even drifting feels like too much motion. So nothing drifts. It simply rests where it is. The mind no longer tries to follow a path. Thoughts don't connect. They don't need to. They appear as faint impressions, then fade before forming shape. Like mist before it becomes cloud. In medieval nights, this was the most ordinary state of all. Not sacred. Not mysterious. Just the natural pause between one day and the next. The body is doing what bodies do when left alone long enough. Repairing. Balancing. Letting go. Quiet work that never announces itself. Breath has settled into something barely noticeable. Not slow. Not fast. Just steady enough to be ignored. Awareness still exists, but it's no longer centered. It doesn't sit behind the eyes. It feels spread out. Diffuse. Everywhere and nowhere in particular. There is no sense of direction here. No forward. No backward. Just being. Even the idea of listening dissolves. Sounds may happen, but they no longer arrive to you. They exist, and that's all. This is where effort would feel unnatural. Like lifting something that is already supported. In the Middle Ages, no one tried to hold on to this moment. They didn't romanticize it. They didn't name it. They let it take them wherever it went. Sometimes sleep deepened. Sometimes it stayed light. Either was acceptable. Rest was rest. Here, memory loosens further. Not forgotten. Just unimportant, the past no longer asks to be replayed. The future no longer asks to be prepared for. Even the sense of having a body becomes gentle. Weight remains, but without outline. Warmth without edges, this is the threshold where language fades naturally. Words feel heavier than silence now, so silence begins to take over. If the words stop registering. If they blur. If they slip past without meaning. That's not something to correct. It's the sign that nothing is wrong. The night continues holding everything evenly. You don't need to cooperate. You're already being carried. There is nowhere to arrive. Nothing to finish. Nothing to stay alert for. Just rest. Quiet, neutral, ordinary rest. Exactly as countless nights before have done. At some point, there is no longer a sense of waiting for sleep. Waiting requires awareness. And awareness has grown very light. The body has settled into something older than habit. Older than routine. An instinctive stillness that doesn't announce itself. In medieval nights, people trusted this silence because it was familiar. They met it every evening. It never surprised them. Thoughts no longer arrive as complete ideas. If they come at all, they are fragments without edges. A hint of motion. A suggestion of warmth. A feeling without a name. They don't linger. The mind no longer distinguishes between inside and outside. Darkness feels the same everywhere. Safe. Neutral. Uninterested. Breathing continues somewhere beyond attention. Steady enough to disappear from notice. The chest moves because it always has. No assistance required. This is where even memory stops forming. Moments pass without being recorded. Nothing here will need recalling later. The sense of time gently dissolves. Not stopped. Just irrelevant. Minutes no longer stack. They melt into one another. In this depth, medieval people would have been completely at ease. They didn't measure nights. They lived inside them. Nothing presses. Nothing calls. Nothing expects. Awareness thins until it feels almost transparent. Present, but no longer attached to anything. Like light passing through fog without illuminating it. Here, the idea of effort feels distant. Trying would feel louder than any sound in the room. So the body doesn't try. Sleep is no longer something ahead. It's something already touching you. Already layered into this quiet. If consciousness fades in brief stretches, that's part of the rhythm. If it returns softly, that's part of it too. Nothing is off track. Words may pass by now without meaning. Or not arrive at all. That's natural. Language belongs to the waking world. The night doesn't need commentary. It continues without explanation. The body is safe. The darkness is steady. The world is still turning, without requiring anything from you. There is nowhere else to go. Nothing else to do. Nothing else to notice. Rest deepens on its own. As it always has. As it always will. Eventually, the sense of more loosens too. There is no next part waiting its turn. What's here is enough. Awareness rests so lightly now that it barely touches anything. Not focused. Not drifting. Simply present without attachment. In this depth, even medieval nights would have felt familiar to modern bodies. The same nervous system. The same biology. Centuries don't change this part. There is no effort left in breathing. No effort left in staying still. The body has stopped participating and started allowing. Thought no longer forms questions. Without questions, there are no answers to chase. That workday part of the mind has gone quiet. If sensation appears, it arrives gently. Warmth. Heaviness. A vague sense of being supported. Nothing asks to be interpreted. This is where memory no longer records. If time passes, it passes unnoticed. If awareness flickers out and back, it does so without drama. Medieval people trusted this space completely. They didn't label it. Didn't fear it. They let it do whatever it needed to do. Here, identity has become optional. You aren't thinking as anyone. You aren't maintaining a self. You are simply resting. Darkness no longer feels like something around you. It feels like something you are within. Contained. Steady. Neutral. There is no reason to move. No reason to decide. No reason to stay awake. Even the idea of sleep feels distant. Too specific. Too narrow. What's happening is broader than that. The body continues its quiet work. Repair. Reset. balance. No announcements. And if words continue to fade, if they blur or stop forming, that's natural. They were only here to guide you close enough. Nothing further needs to happen. Night knows the way. It always has. And you don't need to follow it. You're already there. At this depth, awareness is no longer pointed. It doesn't look at anything. It simply exists, softly, without direction. The body has forgotten the last reason it was holding tension. Not released, just forgotten. And without memory, there is nothing to maintain. In medieval nights, this was when houses felt empty even while full. People slept. Animals slept. Even worries seemed to sleep. The world went neutral. Here, sensation is reduced to the simplest signals. Weight. Warmth. Stillness. Nothing more is necessary. Thought has thinned into something closer to atmosphere than action. If something passes through the mind, it leaves no trace. Like breath on cool air. Gone before it can be noticed. There is no desire to mark progress. No curiosity about what comes next. Curiosity belongs to light. Breathing continues without involvement. The body remembers how. It always does. Time is no longer unfolding. It has flattened. There is no sequence, only continuity. In this state, medieval people did not dream vividly. Dreams require tension. This is rest without tension. Even the sense of, I am here, fades gently. Not disappearing, just becoming unimportant. This is where sleep is no longer an event. It is simply the absence of everything that required effort. Nothing needs guarding. Nothing needs finishing. Nothing needs noticing. The night is doing all the work now. Holding. Balancing. Letting go. If awareness slips away entirely, that's fine. If it lingers faintly, that's fine too. Neither requires correction. Words may no longer register. Or they may arrive without meaning. That's expected. Language dissolves before rest fully deepens. There is no obligation to remain conscious. The world does not require a witness right now. Centuries of nights have proven this safe. You don't need to verify it again. Everything slows because it can. And because nothing is asking it not to. You are resting. Not trying to rest. Just resting. Night continues. Steady, neutral, reliable. And there is nothing you need to do but allow it. There is less distinction between moments. Not because time stopped, but because nothing is measuring it anymore. The body has settled into its most basic agreement with gravity. Held. Supported. Unquestioning. In medieval nights, this was when even the idea of danger slept. Doors stayed closed. Fires burned low. Villages became shapes without stories. Nothing moved unless it needed to. Awareness is now so thin it's closer to presence than attention. Not watching. Not listening. Just being there, softly. If a thought begins, it doesn't finish. If a sensation appears, it fades before naming itself. Everything is incomplete, and that feels right. Breath has become something distant. Like waves heard through stone. Rhythmic. Unconcerned. Reliable. Even memory lets go of itself. This moment won't be stored. It doesn't need to be. Here, the mind no longer looks for meaning. Meaning requires effort. Effort has left the room. Medieval people trusted this state instinctively. They didn't fear slipping away from awareness. They welcomed it. It meant the day was truly done. Nothing needs guarding. Nothing needs remembering. Nothing needs responding to. The night has taken over all responsibility. Holding the body. Holding the dark. Holding the hours until light returns. If consciousness drifts out completely, that's natural. If it hovers faintly, that's natural too. Both are rest. Words now are only echoes. They pass through without staying. Soon, even echoes fade. There is no finish line. No signal. No final moment to notice. Sleep arrives the way fog does. Quietly. Gradually. Without asking permission. You don't need to witness it. The body already knows. It always has. Nothing remains to be done. Nothing remains to be aware of. Nothing remains to hold. Night continues. And you rest within it. Steady. Safe. Unremarkable. As countless nights before have been. At this point, rest no longer feels like something happening to you. It feels like something happening as you. There is no center to awareness now. No fixed point. Just a quiet spread of presence, even, unhurried. The body is no longer holding itself upright in the world. It has folded back into the surface beneath it. Supported. Unquestioning. In medieval nights, this was when even the idea of tomorrow loosened. Morning existed, but far away enough not to matter. Like a promise that didn't need checking. Thought no longer travels forward or backward. It doesn't travel at all. If something appears, it dissolves before direction forms. Breath moves in a rhythm too old to interrupt. Too steady to observe. It carries itself. There is no need to be comfortable. Comfort has already been accepted. There is no need to be still. Stillness has already happened. Here, even awareness has stopped trying to remain awake. It rests too. The dark is no longer noticed. It isn't something around you. It is simply what is. In this depth, medieval sleep blended into waking without a clear border. People didn't mark the moment they fell asleep. They only noticed later that time had passed. That same gentle uncertainty exists here. You don't need to catch the moment. You won't miss anything important. Nothing waits on your attention. Nothing pauses for your awareness. The world is fine. The body continues its slow, quiet work. Repairing. Balancing. Letting go of what it no longer needs to hold. There is no signal to follow. No instruction to obey. If consciousness fades completely, that is rest. If it lingers faintly, that is rest too. Words are nearly unnecessary now. They grow heavier with every second. Silence feels lighter. And so the silence expands. Naturally. Without effort. You are not being led anywhere. You are already where you need to be. The night holds steady. The body stays safe. Awareness loosens its grip and is allowed to do so. Nothing else remains to be done. Nothing else remains to be noticed. Rest continues. Quietly. Reliably. Just as it always has. At this point, rest no longer feels like something happening to you. It feels like something happening as you. There is no center to awareness now. No fixed point. Just a quiet spread of presence, even, unhurried. The body is no longer holding itself upright in the world. It has folded back into the surface beneath it. Supported. Unquestioning. In medieval nights, this was when even the idea of tomorrow loosened. Morning existed, but far away enough not to matter. Like a promise that didn't need checking. Thought no longer travels forward or backward. It doesn't travel at all. If something appears, it dissolves before direction forms. Breath moves in a rhythm too old to interrupt. Too steady to observe. It carries itself. There is no need to be comfortable. Comfort has already been accepted. There is no need to be still. Stillness has already happened. Here, even awareness has stopped trying to remain awake. It rests too. The dark is no longer noticed. It isn't something around you. It is simply what is. In this depth, Medieval sleep blended into waking without a clear border. People didn't mark the moment they fell asleep. They only noticed later that time had passed. That same gentle uncertainty exists here. You don't need to catch the moment. You won't miss anything important. Nothing waits on your attention. Nothing pauses for your awareness. The world is fine. The body continues its slow, quiet work. Repairing. Balancing. Letting go of what it no longer needs to hold. There is no signal to follow. No instruction to obey. No threshold to cross deliberately. Rest unfolds the way it always has. Without asking. If consciousness fades completely, that is rest. If it lingers faintly, that is rest too. Words are nearly unnecessary now. They grow heavier with every second. Silence feels lighter. And so the silence expands. Naturally. Without effort. You are not being led anywhere. You are already where you need to be. The night holds steady. The body stays safe. Awareness loosens its grip and is allowed to do so. Nothing else remains to be done. Nothing else remains to be noticed. Rest continues. Quietly. Reliably. Just as it always has, even the sense of being here becomes softer. Not gone. Just unimportant. Like a thought you don't bother finishing. The body has fully remembered something ancient. How to rest without instruction. How to release without ceremony. It does this better than the mind ever could. In medieval nights, this was when the world truly disappeared. Not dramatically. Just quietly, evenly, without announcement. Fields vanished into dark. Roads ceased to matter. Walls became abstract shapes. Everything unnecessary dissolved. Here, awareness no longer tries to anchor itself. It floats lightly, if it floats at all. No effort. No direction. Breathing happens somewhere far away. It's steady, patient, uninterested in being noticed. The heart keeps time because it always has. You don't need to supervise. Thought has thinned beyond content. It's no longer made of words or images. Just faint texture. And even that begins to fade. This is where consciousness becomes optional. Not switched off. Just unnecessary. Like a lamp left on in an empty room, eventually, someone forgets it's there. Medieval people trusted this forgetting. They didn't cling to alertness. They didn't fear the drop. They knew the body would keep them until morning. Time has lost all structure now. No sequence. No duration. Just an ongoing softness that doesn't divide itself. Nothing presses from behind. Nothing pulls from ahead. There is no tension left to resolve. If awareness slips away entirely, it does so gently. If it hovers faintly, it does so without demand. Both are welcomed. The night is complete in itself. It doesn't need witnessing. It doesn't need commentary. It simply holds. Words have nearly finished their usefulness. They feel distant now. Unnecessary. Silence feels closer. And in that silence, the body rests. The mind rests. Even awareness rests. Nothing else is required. Nothing else is coming. Nothing else matters. The world turns quietly on its own. The past is settled. The future can wait. You are allowed to disappear into rest. Completely. Safely. Ordinarily. As people have done every night, for longer than history can remember.